What's the real line between a spiritual awakening and a powerful biological reaction in your own brain? Some experiences, they're so intense, they seem to blur that line completely. And that's where we find a real mystery about what it means to be human.
So this all starts with a post on Reddit. Someone's going through a really tough time, they start chanting a few lines in Sanskrit, and bam, they're hit with this wave of joy so powerful they compare it to a psychedelic trip. And that leads them to ask this simple but incredibly deep question. Is this normal? That's what we're going to unpack today. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with this sudden, euphoric experience. We'll look at the source, this sacred hymn. Then we're going to explore two completely different ways of understanding it, the spiritual explanation and the scientific one. We'll even get into some of the rules and debates around this stuff, before, finally, we bring these two worlds together. Okay, so let's set the scene. Imagine you're going through a really difficult phase in your life. You're looking for something, anything, to find a little peace. You stumble upon a chant, one that's supposed to help clear away bad karma, and you give it a shot. And the result is, well, it's not just peace, it's pure euphoria, a state of bliss that just erases all your worldly problems. That's exactly what happened here.
And these are the lines. These are the actual verses that kick this whole thing off. Just a few lines from a much bigger text, but they were powerful enough to completely shift someone's reality. So the big question is, where do they come from, and what makes them so potent?
To really get what's going on, we have to understand the source. These aren't just random, pretty-sounding words. They're part of something much, much bigger. We're talking about the Lalita Sahasranamam. This is a huge deal in Hindu traditions. It's a sacred hymn that contains 1,000 names for the Divine Mother. But here's the key. They aren't just names or titles. Each one is seen as a kind of key, a vibratory code that unlocks a different aspect of divine consciousness. Okay, so the first and most ancient way to understand this kind of euphoric rush is to look at it through the lens of faith. What does the tradition itself say is happening here? From this perspective, what the Reddit user felt wasn't just normal, it was a blessing. It's seen as a direct experience of divine grace. The idea is that chanting connects you to the living energy or the Shakti of the goddess. The sound itself is her presence. So when you chant a name like she who emerges from the fire of consciousness, it's not a metaphor, it's seen as a literal truth that you can experience directly. But that's just one side of the coin, right? There is a totally different way to look at this, one that doesn't involve the divine at all, but instead looks right inside our own heads for the answer. Let's see what happens when we look at the brain. So, let's step out of the temple and into the lab for a minute. Let's talk about neurophysiology. What is physically happening in our brains when we repeat sounds and phrases over and over again? It all starts with the simple act of hearing. The sound waves from the chant go into your ear. They get turned into electrical signals, and those signals then get fired off to really important parts of your brain. We're talking the limbic system, which is basically your emotion control center, and the prefrontal cortex, the part that handles all your high-level focus and thinking. And here's where it gets really cool. That rhythmic sound actually starts to change your brain's electrical patterns. Those fast, busy, sometimes anxious beta waves, they start to calm down. And at the same time, the slower, more relaxed alpha waves and even the deep meditative theta waves, they start to increase. Your brain is literally shifting into a different gear, a calmer, more focused state. So this shows us what's lighting up. Your prefrontal cortex, your attention center, gets a boost. That explains the feeling of intense focus. And at the same time, your limbic system, your emotional core, also gets activated. And that can lead to feelings of deep peace, calm, and yes, even intense euphoria. But, it's not always as simple as just grabbing a text and going for it. Within these spiritual traditions, there are actually a lot of rules, guidelines, and some really interesting debates about how you should do this, and even who should do this. This is a really crucial point. Not all chants are considered equal. The one our Reddit user tried, the Lalita Sahasranamam, is a stotra. It's open to pretty much anyone who's sincere. But then you have other mantras, especially ones with what are called seed syllables, that are seen as way more potent. The belief is they can bring up old karma so forcefully that chanting them without a teacher, a guru, could be totally overwhelming. And the tradition puts a huge emphasis on getting the pronunciation just right. The idea is that the specific sound vibrations are what unlock the power. That's why having a guru is often recommended, not to be some kind of gatekeeper, but more like a doctor making sure you're taking the right medicine in the right dose. And to add another layer of complexity, you have debates like this one. This interpretation from Sri Datta Swami suggests that because the hymn describes the physical beauty of the goddess, it's not appropriate for men who are in the position of a son to recite it. It just goes to show you how deep and nuanced these traditions can get.
Okay, so we have these two completely different ways of looking at the same event. One talks about divine energy, the other talks about brain chemistry. So, what happens when we put them side by side?
Just look at this. The spiritual lens uses words like Shakti, devotion, divine consciousness. The scientific lens uses terms like neurophysiological modulation, brainwave entrainment, neural circuits. The language is worlds apart. But look at the outcome they're both describing. A powerful, positive change in your state of mind, leading to focus and emotional regulation, or spiritual upliftment.
And that brings us right back to the original question from that Reddit post, is this normal? And what's absolutely fascinating is that from two totally different worlds, the answer is a clear, resounding yes. One calls it divine grace, the other calls it brainwave entrainment, but both agree that this kind of powerful, euphoric experience is a very real and known outcome. So in the end, maybe the framework you use to explain it isn't the most important thing. Whether you call it connecting to the divine or just modulating your own limbic system, the experience itself is undeniably real. It's a testament to this amazing human technology we all have access to, the power of sound, rhythm, and focused intention to completely change our reality from the inside out.